Welcome back to the Imperfectionist podcast. My name is David Rendell, back from a road trip that included Wisconsin, back to speaking to some military folks in North Carolina, up to Newark to MC a 2-day event for IT business owners, and then back to Wisconsin and road tripping home, hiking at state parks and national parks along the way. One of my goals is to visit all the national parks. And so I thought it was a good idea to visit, or a good opportunity on the way home, to visit Indiana Dunes National Park. If you're ever going to do that, I'd recommend the state park is actually a little bit better. And it's like inside the national park. It's kind of weird. The state park came first. So just got back from doing that. So we're back recording at home. If you're watching this, you can tell that. If you're listening, you can't. So it doesn't matter to you. So today we're going to talk about procrastination. My question for you is, are you a procrastinator? And I've done that a lot. I've asked that question a lot at the beginning of speeches, at the beginning of workshops, at the beginning of classes when I used to teach college classes, graduate school classes, and most people raise their hands. I kind of mess around with people. People raise their hands. Most people raise their hands. I ask people to look around and see the people who are raising their hands. And then I tell them that the real procrastinators haven't put their hands up yet. They're waiting until later to do it. And people laugh because it's actually kind of true. And so I have a different take on procrastination I want to share with you today, because what most people are trying to do with procrastination is get you to stop procrastinating. And if you buy a book about procrastination, it's going to be about how to overcome procrastination. And what I'm going to talk about today is why I think procrastination is actually a very good thing, and why you shouldn't overcome it and you shouldn't try to fix it. You should actually do something completely different with it. So this builds on, if you haven't listened to the previous episodes on personality, I'd encourage you to go back and do that. But this one will stand alone, even if you haven't. But this builds on kind of that idea, because the reason I don't think procrastination is a bad thing, and the reason I actually think that it's a good thing, is because procrastination is a sign that you don't like something and aren't very good at it. And that's great information for you to have. And what you should do is find a way to eliminate that activity from your life or from your work, because it's not an area where you have the chance to be the best and to have tremendous success. So instead of fixing procrastination, overcoming procrastination, I encourage something that I call permanent procrastination. So when you find yourself procrastinating things, there's sort of a few steps to this. So first, start tracking your procrastination. So instead of trying to overcome it, instead of trying to fix it, just track it. And start trying to notice, like in the last episode, we had you track, when are you energized by your work? When do you feel a lot of confidence in the work you're doing or the activities that you're doing? Even if it's on your own time, you get energized by going out to a meal with a lot of people because you love conversation, or you find yourself drained by a meal with a bunch of other people because it's overwhelming to you. So it doesn't matter whether it's at work or at home, but start tracking that. And so with procrastination, you can start tracking that as well. When do I procrastinate? What do I procrastinate? What are the kinds of activities that I seem to want to put off? And the reason that that's valuable is because it's like a big flashing neon sign saying, this is not your thing. This is not alignment. This is not where you have the highest potential, because you should be spending your time on the things that you have a lot of energy, you have a lot of confidence, they fill you up. Time flies. That's called alignment. So procrastination is actually a sign of a lack of alignment. And so instead of fighting it and trying to overcome it and try to eliminate it, we actually want to use it as information of, oh, because if you're going to find alignment, if you're going to spend more time on the things that you're the best at and you have the highest potential, your areas of strength and what gives you energy and what gives you confidence, then you also need to stop doing something. We don't have unlimited time and energy. Well, what are we going to stop doing? We're going to stop doing those things where we don't get energy. We don't have a lot of confidence. Time slows down. We need to eliminate those activities. Well, how do we eliminate them? Well, we need to start noticing when they happen and start categorizing them and realize, oh, those kinds of things don't really work for me. So in an ideal world, I'd find ways to keep reducing, reducing, and ultimately eliminating those activities from my life until I'm doing just things that are alignment for me. But the only way, a lot of people, a lot of companies can buy into that. Oh, okay, alignment. Yeah, let's help people find the right fit. And then you go, okay, but then you also have to give people permission to stop doing things that don't fit. And that's where we struggle. We struggle as organizations, as leaders, but also as individuals because we think, shouldn't I fight through? Shouldn't I push through? Shouldn't I learn to overcome it? Isn't it a problem? Isn't it a weakness that I procrastinate? And my answer is no, it's not a problem. It's not a weakness that you procrastinate. It's a signal about what your strengths and weaknesses are. It improves your self awareness about what your strengths and weaknesses are. And the goal shouldn't be to stop the procrastination. The goal should be to build a life without procrastination because you're not needing to do things that you would otherwise procrastinate. So the only reason people try to overcome procrastination or fix procrastination is because they think there's no way to avoid the activity that they're procrastinating. And if I'm going to have to do it sooner or later, I might as well do it now. And I wish I wouldn't wait. I wish I wouldn't put it off so long. But the goal is really to put it off indefinitely. In fact, I think there's a Mark Twain quote that says that, like, why put off until tomorrow what you can put off indefinitely and end up just as well off? And that's the key. I think people think, well, I won't end up just as well off. I have to write these reports for work and I hate doing it, but I have to do it sooner or later or else I'm going to get in trouble. Well, that's a short term view of it. A long term view says if I have a job where I have to write a lot of these reports and I hate doing it and I don't do it well and I constantly put it off and it drains me and makes me unhappy and somewhat miserable, then the question is, how can I either change roles in my work or find different work, or find a different opportunity at this same business where I don't have to consistently do things over and over that I don't like and I'm not very good at. Um, that's the cure. The cure isn't to fix procrastination or overcome procrastination. It's to build a life where procrastination doesn't happen at all, or at least very often, because you've built a life that fits you. And so that's why this is a great alert. This is a great signal. This is a great, like I said, flashing neon sign. Instead of fighting procrastination, pay attention to it because it's your body, it's your mind, it's your soul telling you this is not your thing. This is not for you. This is not what's going to make you um, incredibly successful or even happy or even fulfilled or even moderately successful, because there's somebody, and this is crucial, there's somebody who loves to do what you're procrastinating. There's somebody who seeks out opportunities to do what you're procrastinating. So if you're running a business, you want that person doing it, not you. You want that person who loves it, that person who looks forward to it, that person who makes up opportunities to do it. You want that person doing that activity instead of you begrudgingly sort of grinding your way through it and doing it with the least amount of possible effort in the least amount of time because you're trying to get it over with as fast as you can. And so it really isn't beneficial for companies to keep having people do things that they would otherwise procrastinate. And it's also not good for you in your life and your career to do a bunch of things that you normally procrastinate, because that means it's draining you of energy. It's not something where you have a high level of ability. So you're not going to create this cycle of success and learning and growth and development and greater success and greater investment and growth and learning, because you're constantly fighting against yourself and forcing yourself to do things that don't fit for you. So I know that this goes against, most of what we grow up hearing. And like I said, every book on procrastination is about how to overcome procrastination. Um, Getting a little warm up here in my studio and I'm getting a little thirsty, so it's time for not sponsored by Liquid Death Mountain Water. I think we're into the double digits on episodes, or we're getting pretty close, and still not sponsored by Liquid Death Mountain Water. But I still love it, and it's nice to feel an ice cold can, especially when you're warm. So it sounds ridiculous to do what I'm saying, and we don't really talk about this in any other situation. In fact, everything we hear is the opposite. When you're in school, stop procrastinating those assignments, stop procrastinating studying. When you're at work, stop procrastinating reports and presentations and whatever it happens to be. So let me give you a real life example. So I was teaching a graduate school class for DeVry University in Raleigh, North Carolina years ago. And I was talking about this idea that procrastination isn't a bad thing. It's a flashing neon sign telling you this isn't your thing. This is not where you're going to be successful. And so we finished the class, and this guy comes up to me, student comes up to me after class, and he says, "Oh, Dave, he goes, you got to overcome that procrastination. The way to do it is to eat that frog." And I'd heard of that before. He'd just been to some Brian Tracy motivational conference, and Brian Tracy's great. I'm not down on Brian Tracy, but Brian Tracy has a book, I believe, called Eat That Frog, and the whole book is about how to overcome procrastination. And the idea is that you start your day with the worst thing. You start your day with the thing you want to do the least. And once you've done the thing you want to do the least, then everything else is easy after that. And that sounds sort of reasonable until you really think about it. It's actually kind of the stupidest thing that anybody's ever said to you. Because if I ask you, what do you like to eat? And you say, I like hamburgers and hot dogs. And I say, perfect. So don't eat hamburgers and hot dogs right away in the morning. Eat frogs. And you go, well, I don't like frogs. And you go, no, 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 that's fine. But eat the frog that's gross and terrible and you don't want it. And then you get to eat the hamburgers and hot dogs. A good question would be, why do I have to eat frogs? Well, because it's gross and it'll teach you to, you're like, no, I want to build a life where I don't have to eat frogs. Frogs sound disgusting. I don't want to live a life where every day I wake up and I have to do some big activity that I hate and I don't like. And in fact, think about it. Doing that creates a life where you have to keep doing that, right? If you have a job that requires you to fill out Excel spreadsheets for 2.5 hours every day, and so you do it first because you hate it, and then you get on to stuff that you like a little bit more. If you keep doing it, you're going to keep having to do it, and your reward for that is you're going to continue to have a job where every day you have to spend at least 25% of your time doing something that you absolutely despise and that you don't like and you're not very good at. That's the reward. The reward for doing things you don't like and you're not very good at is that the people around you will continue to expect, and in fact they might actually give you more. Because just because you don't like it and you're not very good at it doesn't mean you can't sort of force yourself to be competent or have the results be acceptable. Or maybe it's just not even that hard, so it doesn't really matter, right? But the reward is just you have to do more of it. So he comes up, hey, you just got to eat that frog. And I said, well, I don't want to eat the frog. My goal is to build a life where I don't have to do things that I don't like and I'm not very good at. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, that doesn't sound very realistic. And the reason I'm preaching this is because it is realistic, because I sort of have that life. And I know a lot of other people that do as well. And now you can start arguing about percentages. What percentage of your time is it possible to eliminate? There's always some things you have to do that you don't like to do, but that's actually becoming less and less true. And we'll talk about this a little bit more at the end. But I mean, we live in a world right now, the gig economy, where you can pay somebody to do just about anything. People will bring you your groceries. People will make you meals. People will do your laundry. People will drive you around in the car. You don't really have to do anything that you don't want to do. There's somebody you can pay. And then you might say, well, I don't have the money to pay somebody. And then that becomes a cycle, right? One of the ways you get the money to pay people to do things for you that you don't want to do is by focusing your time and energy on the areas where you have the highest potential for success. And therefore you have the highest potential for compensation for those activities. Um, but also, you can start it on a really, really small scale. And we'll talk about this. It doesn't have to be paying people in the beginning, it can be partnering with people. So, even with your household chores with family members or roommates, you can divide up the household chores based on preferences. And even if it's things that some people don't want to do, some people sort of dislike some things less. But oftentimes there are, hey, I like taking out the trash, or you know what, I really like loading the dishwasher, or I really like having the bathrooms clean. And I mean, my wife procrastinates other things that she should be doing by cleaning. So my wife never procrastinates cleaning. She procrastinates like business activities that are actually more important and higher priority by cleaning, because she likes cleaning. Cleaning is sort of energizing for her. She likes the results of cleaning. She likes sort of the mastery and the concrete sort of aspect of cleaning. She likes things to be clean. And so she not only, I procrastinate cleaning, she not only doesn't procrastinate it, it's what she's doing when she's procrastinating. So this is a huge signal for you. Is another question isn't just what I procrastinate, it's what am I doing when I'm procrastinating? What other activities are you filling in with? So you're like, oh, well, I don't like working on those Excel spreadsheets. And so then I'm oftentimes talking to my coworkers about projects. Well, okay, so you like to talk to coworkers about projects, or I like to help people with difficulties that they're having, or I enjoy leading meetings, or I enjoy planning for the future, or I enjoy doing new projects. Well, right. So, how do you start building a job, a life, a world where you're doing more of those things? So, ask yourself, what am I procrastinating? But then ask yourself, start paying attention. What am I doing while I'm procrastinating? Now, sometimes people just be like, I'm watching Netflix, I'm taking a nap. That's not what I'm talking about. When you're actively doing something, what are the activities that you seek out? What are the activities that you do even when you should be doing something else? You're looking for opportunities to do that. Those are the kinds of things you should be doing. So, even in a situation where you say, I don't want to pay somebody, I can't afford to pay somebody to do that. Oftentimes you can, if you have any kind of reasonable job. If you know, you probably can, because you're making more per hour than whoever you would pay to do it. And especially if you're trying to start a side hustle or something like that, that's the only way you're going to get the time uh, to be able to do that. But that's one of the ways. We live in a world where it's more and more possible than it ever was in the past for you to only have to do the things that you like and that you're good at, and that even sort of mundane things. I mean, we have people that change our oil. Anything that needs to be done. People will mow your grass. People will power wash your house. You don't have to do even regular chores anymore. My wife and I, for years, I mean, there's a million ways to try to eliminate this stuff. My wife and I, for years, when our kids were little, we used paper plates and plastic forks and knives and spoons and plastic cups that were all disposable, because then we weren't spending, half of our day. If you've ever had little kids around the house, we weren't spending half of our day doing dishes. So once you start looking for ways to, I call it avoidance, once you start looking for how to avoid these things, once you start realizing it is possible, another question is, does this even need to be done at all? you know Sometimes you don't need to hire somebody else to do it, and you don't need to find a way to do it. But just like I said with dishes, we found a way to eliminate it altogether. Just use paper plates, use plastic cups, use plastic forks and spoons, and eliminate 97% of the dishes that you would be doing. Does this task even need to be done? Does this activity need to be done? I mean, maybe you and your partner need to agree on it, but does the bed need to be made every day? Is that crucial for anybody? Does somebody really care about that? Are you doing things just because that's what people do, or that's just the way it is? um, you don't have to go grocery shopping at all. You can just go out to eat every time. You might say, well, that's not reasonable. There's tons of single men, or some maybe tons of single people. I only know examples of single men, but there's tons of people who have nothing in their refrigerator, and they just live their whole life at restaurants, and now you can have things delivered. So back to eating the frog. Okay. So he tells me, Dave, you just got to eat that frog. Again, I disagree with that entire model. I don't want to eat the frog. I don't want to wake up every day. I don't want to go to bed the night before fearing that my next day is starting with these activities that I know I don't like and that I have to start every day, day after day, week after week, month after month, consistently doing these things that I don't like and I'm not very good at. That isn't a good life. That's what you got to ask yourself. What happened if I overcame the procrastination? All you'd have is a life full of activities you don't like and you're not very good at. And that's not a success. You're grinding it out. But remember, the question is, okay, so now I'm not procrastinating that, but what's happening to me, right? Remember, it's not what you do, it's how what you do makes you feel. And so overcoming the procrastination just keeps putting you in a situation where now you have a life where you're stuck doing stuff over and over and again that isn't creating any kind of happiness or success or fulfillment or any energy or any confidence. So he tells me, Dave, you just got to eat that frog. And he tells me, you do the hard thing first. And so what I had said in the class was, as it related to procrastination, is that I didn't like to grade papers. And I procrastinated grading papers as a college professor. And that's kind of most of the job. Most of the job is grading tests, grading papers, grading assignments. And so I told him that no, I didn't need to overcome procrastination. I wasn't mean to him, but I didn't need his tips on how to overcome procrastination. I had a different goal. And my goal was to eliminate the need to grade papers. Now there was two ways to do that. One was short term and one was long term. So one of the things I did was I had multiple choice tests instead of essay tests because it's much easier and faster to grade a multiple choice test. And fast, you can just have people grade them in class, or you can grade them very, very quickly. You can even have a child grade a 10-question multiple choice test, with a key. Just look for A, B, C, C, D, A, B, and they can grade the papers. So I made it simpler. I made it faster. I made it easier. I basically reduced the amount of grading. I also assigned group assignments. If you've got 16 people in class and you put them in groups of 4 and you have them do a paper and a presentation, then you only have 4 papers and 4 presentations to grade instead of 16 papers and 16 presentations to grade. And then I also just gave less assignments in general. You know, for big group assignment, big group presentation, and not a bunch of individual papers. So one of the ways was to reduce the activity that I didn't like, avoid the activity I didn't like while still successfully doing the job. It wasn't that I didn't have tests or I didn't have assignments, but I was conscious of not trying to eat that frog. I was trying to reduce the size of the frog and reduce how many times I had to eat frogs, if we're going to keep that analogy going. And again, for most people, eating frogs is disgusting. Maybe you've been somewhere with frog legs, but even I have, and even fried frog legs are not very good. And there's just something about it that just mentally I don't want to do. I don't want to do that, right? But then I told him about my goals. And again, some of this stuff you have to separate between the short term and the long term. So short term, you might say, Dave, I have to do this Excel spreadsheet or I'm going to get fired. Okay, fine. But what I'm telling you is over the long term, I want you to start gradually spending more and more of your time doing things that are in alignment and less time in things that aren't in alignment for you, finding ways to avoid those things. And so I was teaching full time management and leadership at a school called Mount Olive College, teaching undergraduates, people getting their bachelor's degree, mostly non traditional students. I was teaching part time at the University of Phoenix, teaching graduate school management leadership, part time at DeVry University, teaching management and leadership. I was teaching Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. They didn't have classes on Friday night. I would teach Saturday morning classes with DeVry. So I'm teaching a lot, which means I'm grading a lot. And I like the teaching. This is crucial. You might say, why didn't you just stop teaching? Well, I liked the teaching. I didn't like the grading. So I was trying to increase the amount of time I spent teaching people and decrease the amount of time I spent grading stuff, right? So that was working. And that short-term strategy was working. But what I told that student was long-term, my goal, because I was building my speaking business in addition to doing the teaching. So in 2004, I started teaching full time and then started teaching part time on the side. In 2005, maybe, is when I started building my speaking business, and my speaking business was growing and growing and growing. And what I noticed about the speaking business was it was everything I liked about the teaching and none of what I didn't like about the teaching. So it was all talking to people and helping people, and no evaluation of those people, no grading papers, none of that sort of stuff. And so what I told this student was, I said, my goal isn't to overcome procrastination, get better at grading, learn to like grading, find tips and tricks to get myself motivated to do grading. My goal is to keep building my speaking business to the point that I can quit teaching and never grade a paper again for the rest of my life. And the reason I know that's realistic is because in 2012, I quit teaching full time, and I had already quit the part time teaching as the business got bigger. And so I quit teaching full time to focus on the business, and I didn't have to grade papers anymore. And I never graded another paper until the pandemic, when the speaking business was sort of devastated, by the lack of travel and the lack of the ability to have meetings and things like that. And I did some online um, teaching for a little while, which got me back into grading in a small way. And now I'm back out of it again, now that things have turned around. But I was able to basically eliminate grading from my life. I didn't overcome the procrastination. I achieved the goal that I was telling you about earlier, which is permanent procrastination. I simply stopped grading papers. I created a life in which that wasn't required of me anymore. And so, again, I understand that. If you're saying, Dave, my life requires me to do this, so I have to overcome procrastination, I'm not arguing that. What I'm saying is your goals over time should be to create a life that isn't like that, because a life like that isn't going to give you happiness, fulfillment, success, energy, and confidence. And trying to overcome it is a short term fix, and it's a recipe for long term unhappiness and pain and exhaustion and frustration, because overcoming procrastination isn't putting you in a position to do activities where you have the highest potential for happiness and success. So, hopefully, that helps you kind of reimagine procrastination, and start seeing it as a signal instead of as something to fight. It's something to embrace. Okay, I'm procrastinating this. Why am I procrastinating it? Try to get clear. What aspect of it? For me, I just don't like paperwork kind of activities. I don't like um, yeah, I don't like paperwork. I also don't like the feedback part of it. I don't like telling people they're good or bad people. I like the good part, I guess. And that's what I do in my speaking, is I encourage people. What I don't like is that this is a bad paper. You cheated. This is an F. You didn't do it right. You didn't do it well. I don't really enjoy anything about that. And I don't want to do that. And I also don't like the act of um, the grading. So ask yourself, what don't I like about this? What doesn't fit about this? Because you don't want to run away from one bad thing just to end up in another bad thing, right? You just want to quit one job because you hate it, just to end up in another job that you hate for a different reason. So part of the importance with procrastination is, what is that flashing neon sign saying to you? Is it saying you don't like routine activities? Is it saying you don't like activities that require you to interact with people? Alignment for you is working for alone. You tend to procrastinate activities that have to be with other people. Or alignment for you is working with other people, working in teams. You don't like um, uh, the opposite, right? So I'll give you another example of how an organization handled this really well. And it's from one of my students back when I used to teach at Mount Olive. So we're still friends. Like I said, we taught adults. So again, I wasn't making friends with 18-year-old girls. When I was a college professor, I was teaching adult students who had careers and who had families. So it was perfectly appropriate to have friendships with them once the classes were over. And I oftentimes wrote recommendations for people for jobs and for graduate school and stuff like that. And you'll understand that a little bit more in a second. So I was teaching a class, and in the evenings we had classes from 6 to 10. And I still remember this. I remember exactly where she was sitting. And there was a student all the way in the back in the corner. And I was complaining about State Farm insurance. And the reason I was complaining about State Farm insurance is because they were doing my car insurance, and we had the automatic payments coming out of our bank account. And one month they accidentally took out two of those payments. So instead of taking out $150, they took out $150 and then immediately took out another $150. And at that moment, that overdrafted my account because of that mistake they made. And then that started causing $30 overdrafts, and then also caused those bills to not get paid. So my cable got shut off, because when you miss one payment with Time Warner Cable, even though we've been a customer for 10 years, they shut off our cable and then wanted us to pay hundreds of dollars to get it reconnected, even though they just shut it off using some kind of switch. And so it created a pretty significant, I think it caused $600, $700, $800 of problems for me, in addition to the money they took out that they shouldn't have. And I don't know, we were in class talking about customer service or talking about responding to customer complaints. I don't know what it was. So I was complaining about State Farm insurance as an example, during the class. And so Kelly is in the back of the class. She's in the corner of the class, and she raises her hand. While I'm still sharing this example, she didn't wait until break time. So she raises her hand um, in the middle class, and she says, I work for State Farm Insurance, and I work for a different agent than the person that you work with. And we would love to have your business, and we would never treat you that way. And I promise that if you work with us, you would have positive experiences with State Farm Insurance. Kelly sold me insurance. She sold insurance to me in the middle of class. Kelly was on the job in the middle of class. Kelly was motivated. Kelly was engaged. Kelly was looking for opportunities because Kelly is a natural born salesperson. She doesn't procrastinate. Like I said, she didn't even wait till break. She doesn't procrastinate selling. She doesn't say, oh, well, I could talk to Dave, but what if he doesn't want to? And I don't want to sort of, interrupt class, and I don't want to embarrass myself, and I don't know if it's appropriate to. No, she didn't procrastinate it. She, boom, you got a problem with State Farm. I sell State Farm. We can take care of you. We can fix this. So at the break, I talked to her. She says, hey, I can bring you some paperwork next week. You'll keep State Farm. You'll just get a different agent. It'll be great, and we'll take care of you. And they did. I did switch over. And a few years later, I got hit by a truck while I was running. And that didn't seem to have anything to do with my car insurance. Um, and Kelly and I, like I said, were friends. I ended up writing her a recommendation for a job. I ended up writing a recommendation for her to get a master's degree. Um, and so we'd stayed in contact on Facebook and stuff like that. She can see my updates. I can see her updates. So she sees on Facebook that I got hit by a truck, and she contacts me. Again, she's doing her job. She already has my business. I don't know anything about this. I'm not going to contact her because I wasn't in my car. So I don't think this has anything to do with my car insurance. And she says, hey, Dave, let's talk, because your car insurance policy covers you whenever you're involved with another vehicle, even if you're not in your vehicle. And so I got a flat, like I think it was $5,000 from State Farm Insurance because I got hit by somebody else's car, and I have some kind of coverage with them that I wouldn't have had any way of knowing about. So not only is Kelly a good salesperson, she recognizes that part of sales is the follow-up. The reason I left the one State Farm agent is because they didn't take good care of me. So Kelly's not procrastinating the sales. She's also not looking for opportunities to avoid doing her job once it comes to customer service. So it looks like Kelly's the perfect salesperson. Like, how many of you wish you had employees that worked like Kelly? How many of you wish you were like Kelly and you were so excited about your job, you were looking for opportunities to do it, even in settings that, weren't work related? Kelly sounds awesome to me. She is awesome as far as I'm concerned, but that's not the end of the story. Because the reason we're talking about this when it comes to procrastination is, A, so you can see what it looks like when you're not procrastinating and when you are in the right situation. But just like me with teaching, I was good at the teaching, bad at the grading. I didn't procrastinate teaching, and I never tried to skip a class. I never didn't want to go teach class. I never didn't want to talk to students. I didn't like the grading. I liked part of my job. I didn't like another part of my job. And that's pretty common, right? So this isn't about throwing everything away all the time. It's about identifying the key elements. And so I learned that, like I said, I like the teaching, don't like the grading. What's mostly teaching and not grading? Well, it's speaking, it's presenting, it's workshops, it's training. And so I moved, I found better alignment because I understood that about myself. So Kelly's got this job where she's great with sales and she's great with customer service and with interacting with people, but that's not the whole story. That's why this is called the Imperfectionist Podcast, right? I wasn't the perfect teacher because I wasn't perfect at grading. Kelly wasn't the perfect employee because she was good with the people work and bad at the paperwork. So very specifically, she'd turn it in late. When you sell something to somebody, especially with insurance, there's tons of paperwork, tons of forms, tons of information, tons of legal documents. And so she was good at selling, closing the deal, but she'd turn the paperwork in late, or she'd turn it in incorrect or late and incorrect, or sometimes she wouldn't really get it done at all, right? So now that seems like a pretty big weakness, pretty big problem. You got to fix that. And you got to certainly stop procrastinating doing the paperwork. Now, what was she doing when she was procrastinating the paperwork? She was out selling more insurance, which was her job. Again, she wasn't watching Netflix. She wasn't taking naps. She loved to sell to people. And she even found opportunities to sell to people in situations where you wouldn't normally think about selling something to somebody. She was born to be a salesperson. Selling was a perfect fit for her. Okay. So what are we going to do with Kelly? And that's the thing. She contacted me. She's like, Dave, I'm in trouble at work because I'm good with the people and I'm bad with the paper. I'm good at the people work. I'm bad at the paperwork. And my boss is getting really upset with me. And so here's the kind of things that we do in situations like that. We offer incentives. Kelly, if you can get your paperwork done on time, we can give you a bonus, right? Or we threaten punishments. If you can't get your paperwork on time, we're going to have to take away part of your commission or part of your bonus or dock your pay in some way. Or we offer coaching. Kelly, you're a good person. You're obviously motivated. And since you're so good at sales, you must have the potential to be really good at paperwork. You're just not doing it. So maybe you need some coaching. Maybe you need to go to a conference. Maybe you need to read a book. Maybe you need someone to give you some help with this. Now, this is another thing to think about because one of the things we'll talk about in a different episode is people love to say how you do anything is how you do everything. And that is 100% not true. And Kelly's story proves that. And we'll talk more about that in a different episode. Kelly was great, 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 not even just above average, amazing at sales. And she was terrible, not just below average, terrible at paperwork. If how you do anything is how you do everything, then Kelly should have been either just as good at paperwork as she was at sales or just as bad at sales as she was at paperwork. But that's not true. There are some things we can be very, very good at while also being very, very bad at other things. There can be some things that we never procrastinate and other things that we always procrastinate. I asked at the beginning, are you a procrastinator? And that's sort of a trick question because you are not a procrastinator. There are things that you procrastinate, and it's important to start understanding what those things are. So we offer incentives, we offer coaching, we offer assistance, we offer threats of punishment, and none of that worked. And Kelly was frustrated and her boss was frustrated. And finally, they did what we've been talking about this whole time. They just hired somebody to do the paperwork. Now, what happened when they hired somebody to do the paperwork? First of all, they got somebody who was good at paperwork because that was their whole job. Do you want to do the paperwork? Yes, I'd like to do the paperwork. Your whole job will be paperwork. Great, because I love paperwork. And I guarantee you, whoever that was that did the paperwork wasn't going to be good at selling. And why? Because if they could have been good at selling, they would have been doing selling, not paperwork, because you can get paid way more to be a salesperson than you can get paid to do paperwork. So it was a person who genuinely liked paperwork and didn't want to do the stuff that Kelly was doing. They didn't wish they were on the calls. They were happy to do a structured, clear, organized task like paperwork, and they loved the precision of it. They loved being meticulous. They loved all the things that Kelly hated. They were good where Kelly was bad, but they were also bad where Kelly was Good. We call that affiliation in the Freak Factor model and the Amplify model. Partner with people who are strong where you're weak. But you might say, well, the company doesn't have money to pay somebody to do the paperwork. Well, they do for two reasons. Number one, because Kelly's selling so much, it doesn't really cost that much to have somebody do the extra paperwork. The next thing is, what's Kelly doing when she's not doing paperwork, when she's not demoralized and exhausted and frustrated, and losing her confidence and losing her energy and having her self esteem negatively impacted by her inability to do paperwork? When she's not using time and energy on paperwork, what's she doing? She's selling more stuff. And when she sells more stuff, she makes more money, the agent makes more money, and they use some of that money to pay somebody to fill out the forms for it. Okay. So that's another example of where procrastination, getting Kelly, you might think the employer's success would have been getting Kelly to spend more time and energy on doing the paperwork well. And it wouldn't have been, because that's not where growth is going to come from in that agency. That person, nobody's making more money. The agent isn't making more money. State Farm isn't making more money. And Kelly's not making more money when Kelly is filling out forms. They're all making more money when Kelly is doing what Kelly does best, and when Kelly is not doing what Kelly does not do best, and when someone else is doing what they do best instead of forcing Kelly to do it. So that's another, again, real life example. I know I can be idealistic. I know some of this stuff you may be like, it sounds good, but I don't know if it's possible to make that happen. And that's why I always use real examples. This stuff is possible, and it also is better. Companies don't win, I've said this before, when people aren't doing what they do best. Companies aren't winning when they go, I don't know, just do your job. I don't know, we just need you to do this. I don't know, I don't have time to figure out I don't have time to craft the job that fits you. I just need you to fill out these forms. I just need you to answer the phones. I just need you to. Well, anytime someone's just doing something just for the paycheck, they're never doing it as well as somebody who, like Kelly, is looking for opportunities to do it, even in situations that don't seem to be set up for doing it, right? So we started with, are you a procrastinator? And we all are. We all procrastinate some things, but we don't need to fix it. We don't need to overcome it. We need to see it as what it is, which is a signal that we're on the wrong path, that we're in the wrong spot. Sometimes people might say, I don't know what I'm best at. I don't know what my strengths are. Well, fine. Then start with, what are you bad at? And one of the ways to answer that, what are my weaknesses? One of the ways to answer that is, what am I procrastinating? And then a way to get to the positive side is start to say, and what don't I procrastinate? What do I do willingly? What do I look forward to? What do I do while I'm procrastinating? And that starts to give you a signal of what you should be doing and what alignment is for you. So, one of the things that I've been encouraging people to do is to comment and to send in their feedback and their questions. And I'm going to share one. Now, when somebody shares something with me in like a direct message or an email or something like that, I'm not going to share their name and personal information, because if they didn't post it on social media, generally I don't want to share something that somebody didn't want to be public, right? So this comment came through a message, and so I'm not going to share the person's information, because that's their thing. But I want to share with you the feedback, because this was really encouraging to me, and it helps you understand sort of what kind of impact I'm hoping to have with this podcast. And so this person said that my partner has me hooked on your podcast. I've been binging it on Spotify for a few weeks now. It's making a huge impact in my ADHD business owner life. Now, there's a couple of things there that are already perfect. If you said, who's the perfect audience for like my speeches and my presentations, if you feel like you have some kind of neurodiversity, ADHD, autism, dyslexia, anxiety, depression, whatever it happens to be, and I think sooner or later, all of us have one of those things, the Imperfectionist is going to be perfect for you. Secondly, if you own a business or you manage other people, you're a leader. Now it's not just for you, it also helps you manage and lead other people. And then also, if you're you're married or you're in a relationship with somebody, this is very powerful for a relationship. So this person, it's benefiting them because they have all of those things happening. Um, and so this is something I'd encourage some of you to start doing. I get a lot of good feedback in my speaking and in my podcast, but I think an easy thing for people to do is like deflect that or feel uncomfortable with having people compliment you or just say thank you or whatever it happens to be. What I would encourage you to do when you get positive feedback is ask a question about it. My question is when somebody says, "Oh, I really liked your speech," or "Oh, I really liked that podcast," I ask, "What was the most interesting or helpful part of the episode or the podcast or the presentation?" Because it helps me learn. I know what I'm saying and I know what I'm intending, but I don't always know what people are hearing, right? And so it gives me feedback on what's actually benefiting people so I can tailor what I do to benefit people the most. And um, so they said, I've been binging on Spotify for a few weeks now. It's making a huge impact in my ADHD business owner life. Absolutely love it. So again, it'd be easy to stop there. But then I just said, what has been the most interesting or helpful part of the podcast? And they said, so a lot of validation on the podcast. So this is really key. Part of what I'm hoping to do is kind of change your mind and maybe change your direction and help you build a better life than you already have. But also, part of what I'm hoping to do is affirm. I call it affirmation. Validation is the same word. Everything starts with an A, if you've noticed: acceptance, appreciation, alignment. So, affirmation. Part of what I'm hoping to do is change minds, but also to support and encourage and affirm what you might already doing that's consistent with this, especially because you're probably getting negative feedback from other people, since what I'm talking about isn't the way people normally, it's not the advice people normally give. So they said a lot of validation on the podcast. Um, and that being diagnosed with ADHD last year is not a sign of a weakness. So this has already been a theme a few times. People have talked to me about adult diagnosis of autism or ADHD, and that's sort of a little bit different. You normally think about those things being diagnosed in childhood. So being diagnosed as an adult, that ADHD is not a sign of weakness. And then the one podcast about the autistic son and the company that was created for him to work at made me cry. So that's the one. Specialistern. Thorkill Son started a software testing business because his son had autism, and autism for his son and for most people is hyper focus and the desire to do the same thing over and over again. And Thorkill saw that software testing required hyper focus and doing the same thing over and over again. So we talked about finding the right fit, but you can also create the right fit. And so he built a company for his son and other people with autism that's become tremendously successful, called Specialistern, and also set the example for companies all over the world to start hiring people with autism, to focus on what people with autism can do instead of what they can't do. So she said the one podcast about the autistic son and the company that was created for him to work at made me cry. My brothers have special needs. So this is another theme. If you're not neurodiverse, you probably have somebody in your family or in your friend group who is. And so this can help you have a better, different perspective on them and a better, different relationship with them. She said, my brothers have special needs, and it's been very tough for them to being accepted or having resources for them. And this is why I didn't share this person's information. They said, I have hesitations about how to post on social media about my business because I have these fun, wacky ideas. So now this is some pink goldfish stuff. I have these fun, wacky ideas and would be a little embarrassed to be different than my industry. So they're fighting the how do I be different without feeling bad about being different, without different seeming wrong. And that's a huge theme. That's why it's called the freak factor. And that's why in Pink Goldfish, we talk about, differentiation is always going to look like a weakness. It's always going to seem like a mistake and like you're doing something wrong. So she's feeling affirmed and validated that maybe it isn't wrong, that maybe it's right, and that it's okay, not just okay, but good to be different. And then this last one almost made me cry. Your stories are just really encouraging, and I don't feel alone, right? One of the reasons that it's hard to be a freak, it's hard to be different, it's hard to stand out, is because we can feel alone. We want to be liked and we want to be accepted. And it seems like the way to do that is to try to be like other people and to conform and fit in. But that's not real acceptance. That's fake because you're putting on a mask in order to do it. But the reason we're afraid to do it is we talked about this with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. All of the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names. They never let poor Rudolph join in any reindeer games. We're worried about being alone if we're too unique, and nobody wants the kind of uniqueness that we have. And so the other part of affiliation is partner with people who are strong where you're weak is part of affiliation. The other part of affiliation is find people who are weird like you. And that's what the Imperfectionist podcast can be. It can be a community of this is not only okay, this is good. And I won't be alone if I'm unique because there are plenty of other unique people. And I think we're all unique. So sometimes we're just not acknowledging it, but there's plenty of other people who are unique, and we can join together and we can not only find a community here with the Imperfectionist podcast, but hopefully I'm introducing you to, Thorkill Son, who's creating the Specialist Stern Foundation, a community for people with autism, and Peter Shankman, who wrote Faster Than Normal and has a podcast about it and is creating a community for people with ADHD, and business owners like Richard Branson and Paul Orfala who have dyslexia. So, in introducing you to this concept and helping you find this world where if you're looking for it, you'll find plenty of people who see dyslexia as an advantage. You just probably haven't been looking for it. And hopefully I'm introducing you to those things. So saying that the stories are really validating, and that your stories are really encouraging, and I don't feel alone, that's part of what we're trying to do here. And if that's all we accomplish, that's success. So I'm really excited about that comment. And there's been a few other ones, but that's the one that I'll share this week. I'll share other ones next time. So if you have comments, if you have questions, if you have feedback, and again, I'm not just looking for praise. If you have questions, if you're like, Dave, I need help with something. If you're like, Dave, I don't know if that makes sense to me, or I need some clarification, or can you tell me more about, or do you have other examples or resources? I'd love to be sort of directly helpful, either, through email or through the comments, or, address it on the podcast in some way, if that's a more appropriate way to do it. So we're still not sponsored by Liquid Death Mountain Water. Delicious and refreshing. We haven't done a shoe of the week in a while, and so we're going to do pink low top Chuck Taylors. This is actually, I didn't think about this. I'm using them as the shoe of the week because I'm going to wear them tomorrow. I have this custom made gray and pink pinstriped suit. That's a 3-piece suit with this beautiful vest and this really cool shirt and tie that go with it. And it's custom made for me. I'm 6'6" and I weigh about 190 pounds. That's a weird body. And so I finally got this perfect custom made suit that fits me perfectly. And it cost a lot of money, but I thought I'd make an investment in my appearance since I'm up on stage in front of people all the time. And the funny thing about that is I wear that custom pink suit, but the perfect shoes are these pink Chuck Taylors that I wear with it. And the funny thing is I don't know, I think it might have cost me $2,000 or something crazy, the most money I've ever spent on any kind of clothing. And I'll wear that suit and it looks really good. And I will get compliments on it. But the most common compliment I get when I'm wearing that suit with those Chuck Taylors is, hey, those are amazing shoes. So $2,000 suit, $30 shoes that haven't changed since 1950. People love the $30 shoes that haven't changed since 1950. And that's a great Imperfectionist podcast story. People tell you have to change, you have to adapt, you have to move forward, you can't stay the same. Chuck Taylors, if anything, are just as popular or more popular than they ever were. My 17-year-old daughter wears Chuck Taylors. My 22-year-old daughter wears Chuck Taylors. They're just as cool or cooler than they've ever been. They haven't changed. They're uncomfortable. If you've ever worn a Chuck Taylor, they're just completely flat inside, no arch support. None of the improvements in shoe technology have come to the Chuck Taylor, and yet they're doing fantastic. They're really cool, and people love them, and they love them for what they are, and they don't need them to be something that they're not. So These pink Chuck Taylors, good imperfectionist story. They haven't changed, they haven't improved, they haven't updated, and yet people still love them. They're not perfect, they're imperfect, and yet they're very, very not, and yet they're successful almost precisely because of that. They're a classic now, and people can't stop buying them and wearing them. So pink Chucks are the shoe of the week. Um, we had that great comment, and we talked about procrastination this week. So we're back home, back in the studio. If you're watching, I got my cool Rendell Farms shirt on that Mike Bazaar gave me, which is cool because I don't have a farm, but my grandparents were farmers up in the middle of Wisconsin. They didn't call it Rendell Farms; they called it Lelands because my grandfather's name was Leland, and so they called it Lelands, which was kind of a cool play on words. But I love my pink Rendell Farms shirt, which is pink because of me, but also because it's got a pig on it. So thank you to Mike Bazaar for that. Also, this is not coming out on September 19th, but I am recording this on September 19th. And it is my mom's 70, let me get this right, 77th birthday. So happy birthday to Sherry Rendell. Also, didn't work at Rendell Farms, but definitely grew up on a farm in a one-room schoolhouse sometimes in Wisconsin. So she knows a little bit about the farming life as well. So happy birthday to my mom on September 19th. And she and my dad just moved down to Florida from North Carolina. So I think today is actually their first day in a new house. So congratulations to them on that. So thank you for joining us here on the Imperfectionist podcast. We will see you again next week. I am David Rendell, and I want you to stay imperfect.